let us just pause this Sunday evening and just take what I'd like to say is just a little pulse check, a little temperature check, a little which way is the wind blowing moment. Now, Australia produces 1% of global emissions. Therefore, 99 problems in Australia ain't one, right? 1% is Australia. China, if you're looking at, say, a climate clock starting at midday and working your way around, well, about 20 past is China, then the rest of the world is halfway, then the United States, then India, then Russia. That's 45 minutes of the 60 minutes of the climate clock. And as you know, Australia, 1% of the world's problems. But there are certain populations who believe, and let's be honest, as they have moved their faith from organised religion and community, they have now turned that the single greatest threat is not going to heaven or hell, but the single greatest threat is whether the planet will or will not be habitable by humans within the next 2 weeks. So therefore, we must have not just action on 1%, but 1% of the world should be able to flush out 99% of the world's problems. This has been borne out in multiple elections, yes, in 2022, and again in 2025. The Prime Minister has signed deals to suggest that the 1% of the problem will do the best we possibly can, with 83% of all of our power coming from renewables and 43% of 1% of the world's climate problems to be dealt with by 2030. Now, it's a big deal. It's a big promise, and something that those of us who have been debating this issue for years and years, television, radio and in private, is that it's not a question about whether climate change exists or not. That is well and truly, in my view, settled and has been settled for some time. The question is, how much does 1% of the world's problem have to do to fix any more than 1% of the world's problem? And of course, the problem being that even if the 1% of the problem did all of the heavy lifting, well, the 99% still affects our atmosphere, our weather. Even if everything is done that everyone says to be done in the 1%, there's still going to be a bushfire. There's still going to be a flood. Why? Because last time I checked, the climate does not stop at the borders of the great island continent. The consequence, of course, of the signing of the UN bill, the guaranteeing that 83% of 1% of the world's climate problems will be fixed when it comes to renewable energy, well, that, of course, already cost us a lot of money before we started on the journey. Then there was a promise of a Prime Minister at his first election that those power bills would go down by $275. Instead, those power bills, of course, went up by more than $275. But they won an election anyway. So this matter electorally seems to be settled. I know there's passionate argument that maybe there's some way to reverse this, but from where we sit, this is the moment. But again, let's just check the logic here. And in some ways, when people who are fundamentalists are confronted with the reality that is therefore the limits of logic sometimes on their faith, they start to get a bit annoyed. The same applies to those who are fanatical about Australia's capacity to do anything more than fix 1% of the world's problems. For example, the Tiffany Teals. People who represent pretty comfortable parts of Australia, but none of those parts of Australia represented by any of the MPs there, minus one, of course, Zoe Daniel, congratulations. To the people of Goldstein for getting rid of her and Tim Wilson for replacing. None of those people represent electorates that are willing to do anything about 1% of the world's problems. Now, they might be willing to do something to bring down their own private power bill, like, say, solar panels on the roof, or maybe the electric car, or maybe the battery. But are they willing for any of their dog parks, golf courses, reserves, or headlands to have to do what regional Australia has had to do, and that is to change either A, their physical appearance, or B, have some serious environmental consequences? You see, for those of us who do not debate the existence of climate change, so don't put me in that box, but those that have always said the cost of transition is the thing I always want people to be honest about. Because if people know the cost and they know the change and they know what's going to happen, then they may not back it in. the political results may be different. But you have this scenario where the places that have had the biggest change in their political attitudes are the places that do not see the same sorts of trauma, put simply, to the landscape that other people around Australia do, particularly those regional areas. So again, 1% of the world's problem. I'm not breaking any news to you. 83% of 1% of the climate problem when it comes to renewables that supposedly would bring down bills. But because you have to build all of this technology, the bills go up. Yet the government gets re-elected anyway, despite the fact that there's a pretty obvious delta between the promise and the reality. Then, of course, the Tiffany Teals who get re-elected by saying we must have more action but don't dare change a dog park. Well, then, of course, you have the scenario where even after this result, you still keep getting gaslit by the man in charge, the man who is going to push on with the system and is going to try to get where he has always dreamt of going, regardless of how much it costs you. And amazingly, despite people saying that they don't want the cost, they keep voting for the cost anyway.
We will continue with the instruction the Australian people gave us, that is to continue with the work of delivering the cheapest, most reliable and cleanest form of energy, which is renewables.
Which brings me to today's news. To connect the renewable projects in Victoria, I'm talking mostly here about wind, but yes, some solar, the stuff that has caused huge troubles and locals that have been blowing up about it for some time, is that you have to put in brand new transition wires. Transmission, I should say, M, not N. Well, not the far right wing, but the left wing, The Age, The Guardian, the ABC today, reporting the cost of the state's renewable energy transmission plan is going to double. The estimated cost of connecting Victoria's renewable energy zones has nearly doubled to now $8 billion. So your power bills were apparently high because coal was running towards the end of its life. And then your power bills went up because there was a need to build the new infrastructure. And then the power bills kept going up because we needed more of the infrastructure. Now the cost of the infrastructure has doubled, meaning what do you reckon the next thing is going to happen when it comes to the great energy revolution in Australia? Oh, that's right. Your bills are going to keep going up. But if you comment on the bills, if you comment on the landscape, if you comment on the logic of what 1% of the problem can do for the other 99% of the problem, well, of course, you are a denier, a knuckle dragger, somebody who's deeply into the past, somebody who's not getting with the program, somebody who's holding us back. From what? As our political leaders will slowly make their way back to Canberra over the next couple of days to be part of this economic summit that we'll talk about a lot in the next few days, a new opinion poll, in fact, a couple of opinion polls have dropped tonight. They show that the Labor Party has become more popular since the last federal election. So despite the fact that people like myself and certainly many others are saying that there's lines that have been crossed and terrible moments that have taken place, the Labor Party's popularity is more popular than ever before in recent years and certainly close to 60-40 now, many months after the federal election. People always write emails to me saying, stop talking about the federal election. Well, I can't replace it with any other scoreboard. It is the one that you might like to forget, but it's the one that's up and must be seen. But rather than high-fiving Labor, guess who's doing really well out of these polls? One Nation. Now, One Nation just came off an absolutely ripping election where they got senators in New South Wales and Western Australia, as well as Malcolm Roberts getting another 6 years in Queensland. So One Nation will have at least 3 senators for the next 6 years. Pauline is up in 3 years' time. Fingers crossed, our dear friend Lee Hansen, well, she will be another that will be coming from Tasmania sooner rather than later. But let's have a look at the latest Resolve poll when it comes to the standing of the individual parties. Labor, 37%, up 3. The LNP, down to 29%. That's down from 3% after the last election. They're in a world of trouble. The Greens, 12%, basically the same. One Nation is up by 3 points. Independents up by 1, others down by 2. But pay attention there. Now, you could very simply say that, well, you take a bit from here and you move a bit there and you move it around here. But reality is One Nation has grown by a bigger margin than the government has, as the government is moving its way towards 60-40. Now, is it people who are exclusively LNP supporters, or is it others going from somewhere else? I don't know. We'll all find out together. But one thing I promise to do over the next 3 years is to always be honest, which to be honest, and you never get credit for this, but over the past 3 years, I was honest about the polls. Because I remember making a colossal mistake before the 2022 election, which is that I read too much into the preferred Prime Minister and the don't know number and all of that, because it was right when we were talking about Shorten back in 19. But one thing I've done between 22 and 25, and I'll do between 25 and 28, is to tell you the numbers as they are. Not as I wish them to be, but as they are. And contrary to the popular belief of those, including many in the young Liberal set, who want to pretend that the Liberal Party never had any chance of getting anywhere near government, they were holding, of course, the two-party preferred lead until February, and then it collapsed, principally because interest rates, apart from everything else, and there was a lot of everything else, interest rates fell in February, Trump tariffs in February. All right? Those were the determinant factors that certainly started the big run that resulted in where it is, and a run that has not stopped since the election. In the Resolve poll, they published the comments of people who partake in their surveys about what they are thinking of politics of the day. Now, they pick them, so I don't know from what other sample we could pick their comments, but here are some of the people who are saying what they are thinking about the polls that show a surge for One Nation and, of course, the government continuing to rise post the election. With the Liberals in decline, we need to look to other alternatives to Labor. I'm not happy with Albanese. He's just ignored the algal bloom here in South Australia. Labor achieved nothing, but unfortunately the Libs have become a bit more of a joke in recent years. At least the Liberals are a more appealing leader now. It's really about picking the lesser of two evils at the moment. That's what it feels like. We were promised relief of living costs at the election, but we're not getting it. Geez, who told you that in the many weeks and months before an election? Don't believe them. Anyway, our government seems fixated on foreign agendas. Focus here at home. Okay, sure, but that would explain why their numbers have gone up. Didn't go down, went up in a poll that, by the way, was being taken last week while much of that drama was playing out. The promises being made to buy our votes are just too extravagant. Yeah, I agree with you. The Liberals saying that they wanted to suck up to Donald Trump has just put me off for good. Well, they never did. Meaning, of course, you don't get your news from sources like ours where we will show you how the sausage is made, including the BS that often the media puts into it. Which brings me to Jim Chalmers and the week that he is due to have at the Economic Reform Roundtable. Now, remember when this was supposed to be about productivity? Productivity puts people to sleep, but economic reform is a big general term that also puts people to sleep. And you know what I love? Come back to me here, because you know what I love? I love when politicians, and basically all bar a few, and you know the ones that are a few, they all think they're rock stars. They all think that everyone knows who they are, where they are, everything that they're doing. They think that it's not showbiz for ugly people now, it's just showbiz. Like that garbage we show you all the time about the silly social media stuff. These people honestly think that they're the winners of a popularity poll with 120,000 people every 3 years, and therefore I am beloved. Well, I've got to say, a little reminder, a little prick to the ego of the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, and the Prime Minister, and the press gallery, and everyone who thinks that this really matters, when, of course, it's kabuki theatre. There was a poll that was done by an organisation via the JWS research organisation. Its results were handed to the Telegraph. Most Australians unaware of the Economic Roundtable. I love this. I just love this. And when that bloke is just polishing his credentials as greatest treasurer ever, or measuring the curtains of when he's going to become the Prime Minister, Jim, 3 in 4 Australians don't know about Labor's Economic Roundtable, that it's even happening. And a majority fear productivity means working more, says a new poll highlighting the reform challenge for the Treasurer. This is my favourite bit, though. Even once the roundtable was explained to them, only 29% of people say that they were confident it would lead to meaningful change, compared to 60% who were not. That's according to the survey of 1,500 people, as I just said. It is a little reminder that, again, for those of us that swim at that end of the beach where we like to count the sand and pay attention to the detail, the extreme majority of people, they're off doing something else. Their assumption is, politics matters once every 3 years. You and I do both know the decisions that happen at events like this really matter. It's why we've talked about it for weeks. It's why we'll talk about it for days. But also the process matters. Because, you see, this is the government that always knows where it's going, regardless of how it says, we're open to ideas. Put simply, the economic reform table is a temperature check about all of the people in that room who are therefore on the inside of government making decisions. If you're not in the room, then you are not going to be in the room for whatever your industry will be dealing with over the next 3 years. And to make sure that you stay in the room to be able to talk with the people who are going to regulate your industry, kiss the ring. Kiss the ring. Come on, lovingly. Mean it. Be intimate about it. Okay, too much. But you get the point, right? That's why none of them will rock the boat. Why? A triangle of dependence. Well, Jim Chalmers, of course, has decided to have a go at anyone who's calling this out for being the kabuki theatre that it is, or the, how many? 60-something% who say nothing's going to happen here, or the, as previously mentioned, 3 in 4 who haven't even heard of it. But of course, he's having a go at people like me for suggesting anything other than this is the red carpet greatest minds meeting on the most important of issues, not an opportunity to just kiss the ring.
There will always be the usual kind of grumps and cynics who say the usual grumpy and cynical things about this. Their argument essentially is to involve people less, which would seem to me to be a strange way to go about things. I think the effort has already been worth it.
But polls are polls, and you can ask any poll on different people and it'll give you a different result. Let's go over to the Australian newspaper, where the majority of people back economic reform. They were asked here by JWS Research, I'm sorry, the other group was YouGov, about those who strongly support 15 plus 35, so let's say 50% of people support the concept of economic reform. But does anyone know what it means? Does economic reform mean we pay less taxes? Does economic reform mean we have to work longer hours? Does economic reform mean that you get paid more money to work less hours? We'll all find out together, but it's just one of those big pots of which you get to put whatever you want into, and that's the politics. You see, one of the great arts of a very successful machine, and Labor is a relentlessly successful machine, that when it is out of play in federal politics, hones its craft in state politics, works out how to play the game and does more of the same once they get back to federal politics. And they honestly believe that they are in a moment right now, and they may be in a moment right now, of Howard-esque dominance over the political sphere. And why wouldn't you think that when you look at 60-40, basically, when it comes to the overall picture in two-party preferred? Now, we know this thing is not actually about ideas because they are already decided where they're going. Now, I love wrestling and WrestleMania because I enjoy the theatrics of it, but I also know that the outcome is predetermined. And this is about as authentic as who's going to win and who's going to lose in a wrestling match, okay? Because not only was the ABC the recipient of documents, which are basically the action points of a meeting that hasn't happened yet, but the government is already leaking to friendly media, which is basically all of it, bar people like myself that are just yapping away at their heels. But don't worry, think of it as the Achilles heel. Yapping away. They don't have that total dominance, only 95% control of the machine, which is why they come after us so hot and heavy. But who cares? We keep fighting. We're doing it for you. Well, of course, they have already decided. And they're even telling people like Channel 9 tonight what the outcomes of the summit are going to be, which is really strange because I thought they hadn't had the summit yet.
To speed up the building of new homes, the National Construction Code will be frozen and AI deployed to process environmental red tape holding up 30,000 housing approvals. On electric vehicles, the summit will spur national rollout of a road user charge to replace fuel excise. There'll be no changes to GST, negative gearing or capital gains tax, nor is the government keen to consider any changes to industrial relations laws.
Just why I agree with Parnell Palm McGuinness writing in the Channel 9 papers today that this roundtable could have been an email. Because while they are pretending, oh, we've got a suggestion box here, not one of the suggestions will influence what they are already planning to do. And we will all sit around pretending to watch this speech and that speech and who walks in and who walks out. They already know what they're going to do. To the events that have involved the President of the United States and the President of Russia of recent days, Saturday morning Australian time is when there was the meeting between the two presidents. For some reason, the idea that a literal red carpet was rolled out was some sort of a sign about capitulating to the evils that are Putin. And Putin is evil.
That moment on the tarmac was really striking. I don't think we spent even enough time on it, where the B-2 bombers were flying overhead as the two leaders were walking up to that sign that said Alaska 2025. I mean, Trump is a producer's producer. He cares a lot about visuals, right, and the visual effects of what that looks like. I wonder what that did signal to you.
Look, I mean, he's both a TV producer, but also was an actor on his own show, and so he does think about what these things look like. This is the type of display of pageantry and grandiosity that he really likes.
These people. Okay, you don't have to like Trump. You can hate Trump. But can we all just understand? Yes, Trump is the producer, all right? But also, in terms of taste, this is the guy who likes gold in the bathroom, right? You've seen the house, you've seen the apartments. He has a certain knack of the way he likes to decorate things. Can be your style or not, who cares? But I reckon Donald Trump, after going to places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE that go way over the top, when he was there, here's the gold sword and here's everyone riding around on a horse and, you know, all of the over-the-topness, that perhaps he thought meeting just in the tarmac in Alaska was not fancy enough. So let's throw in the B-2 bombers going over the top like it's the Super Bowl. Beautifully timed, by the way. Spectacularly timed. Let's walk on a carpet, but, you know, the carpet may well have also been there so they don't wander off from the precise television moments that they wanted. But again, perhaps I'm over-intellectualising the red carpet, just like the people who hate him have over-intellectualised the freaking carpet. Of course, they're there to discuss the Ukraine war and hoping that Russia will end it. Russia is the aggressor. Again, for those that are half paying attention, the bad guy is obvious in this, right? And it ain't Ukraine. But Ukraine has lost territory. So what are they going to do? For this whole thing to finish off, are they going to trade things away? Well, apparently that's exactly what Putin was saying. Putin was saying that at least, I believe, a couple of the territories that are currently being fought over should just be given away and Russia gets to keep them. In fact, an inside baseball or inside politics newsletter in Washington had some briefing here that the peace comes in the terms that the Russian President Vladimir Putin laid out with the summit, with the president, include that Ukraine withdraw entirely from two of its eastern regions. So all of this apparently will be discussed, in fact was discussed with Zelensky over the weekend, that conversation going about an hour, then a conversation when it came to the English leaders, European leaders. And there is now apparently going to be Zelensky turning up having a meeting with Trump sometime this week. I hope it goes better than last time.
You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
I can tell you
You're
again,
running low on soldiers.
Listen, please,
you're running
Mr.
low
President.
on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
I love it. So with the boredom and the pre-planned nonsense will happen in Canberra, the reality of some fireworks may well be happening in Washington, D.C.